You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space. And for the next half an hour, we're going to be rounding up August's Doctor Who news, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
And I'm John.
Just the two of us. In fact, up until 2 hours ago, there were 4 of us on this call. And then up until half an hour ago, there were 3 of us on this call. And now, making the call, we're down to 2 of us. It's been a bit of a disastrous day, hasn't it, John?
It seems to have been, yes. I'm glad I've got through it.
Well, at any second now, I'm going, and then you can do the rest of the news by yourself.
Oh, excellent.
And then 10 minutes before the end of the episode, you'll go too, and the last 10 minutes will just be a blank screen.
Oh, my word. RTD's been seen at Manchester Pride. That's about as much as I can give you.
This is August's news, so we're not going to go through everything that's been, the latest issue of Doctor Who magazine. They listed 4 cast members who are about to be in the next series of Doctor Who. But I got to be honest, I don't think I've ever heard of any of them, frankly.
I think I've heard of one, and that was it.
Gemma Arrowsmith. Oh, she looks vaguely familiar, actually. Billy Brayshaw. Is he any relation to Edward Brayshaw?
That's what I wondered. His grandson, maybe?
It just says he's been in CBBC's Still So Awkward. Mary Malone, I don't know. And Mahid Madzidove Valuyerdi. I think I mangled that. I don't know him either.
It's good and diverse casting again. You can't fault Andy Fry's job.
Yeah, let's talk about things that we do know a bit about, because this is just an excuse to rattle out some opinions, really, rather than actually talking about the news. Or sometimes it's about opinions, sometimes it's about other things. Let's start with the big story. And this is, I say, the big story. This is not the big story. Dylan, who was supposed to be on this call, suddenly piped up yesterday, are we going to talk about this? And I said, oh, I hadn't heard that. So he explained a bit further, and I said, well, yes, we should definitely talk about that. And instead of me researching that, I'll just ask you and you can tell me about it. And now he's not here. So this is the rumour that Series 14, the first series with Ncuti Gatwa, is going to be delayed. So apparently there's going to be an announcement this week. And at the end of the announcement, I think it was a news story about the Christmas special. And at the end of the news story about the Christmas special, it was due to say, plus Series 14 starts spring 2024. And apparently that final message got removed at the very last minute. And the reason why it was removed at the very last minute is suspected to be because the BBC can't guarantee that Series 15 will go into production when it's due to go into production because of the writers' strike in America. And thus,
and the actors.
Yeah. Thus, if Series 15 gets pushed back to, say, for instance, the autumn of 2025, in order to have Doctor Who on a regular rotation once every 12 months at the same time of year every year, then they would push the spring 2024 series back to the autumn of 2024, so that there's only therefore a year before the autumn of 2025. Of course, I mean, that's just the speculation. There's not necessarily any truth in that. And even if there is truth in that, they're not going to know how long the strikes are going to go for. And potentially because it's a British production and most of it is presumably written already, if it was due to start production in the next few weeks, then potentially they could have gone into production anyway, at least for a while, with what was ready. Point being, there seems to be a lot of speculation around this, but speculation that doesn't necessarily marry up necessarily to any of the facts. So, John, before we talk about do you think it's right, do you not think it's right, why do you think they removed the thing? We were talking about unions, but your opinion on the union was, I mean, slightly different from any speculation that Dylan or I were making.
Yeah, I mean, Doctor Who is almost entirely a British cast and crew, and British employment law fundamentally forbids you to do what you call sympathetic strikes, which are strikes which are not an issue you're concerned about, but which you will take.
It's somewhere in your
take
industry, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you're not allowed to do that. So fundamentally, that this is, as far as we know, a BBC production, which may be partly funded by foreign revenue from Disney. It would not be right under any law for it to not go into production. So unless they're maybe waiting for, I think it was Dylan suggested they might be waiting for a guest star or two, because they probably would be covered by the SAG equity agreement. So it would be good for a US actor to be seen to be working.
No, but then again, you wouldn't close down an entire production of an entire year's worth of series just for an actor or a couple of actors.
Not
You'd
at all.
Replace the actors.
Yeah, I mean, you look for a different guest star. Totally.
Exactly. So that doesn't sound like that has the ring of truth about it.
I really can't see it.
We'll
have a better idea on how long the strike lasts, I think, in the next couple of weeks, because this is when they're usually putting together the writers' rooms, the production staff. And if they're not doing it now, you are going to have pretty much a hole in the US entertainment industry for the rest of the year, because they're not going to be in production.
Yeah, well, what happens with television is they normally go into production in the autumn of year A, such that the programs can be going to air in the autumn of year B. And most American television, and this always has been the case, I don't think it's quite the case so much anymore because of streaming, but it's probably still the case with a lot of the networks. And there still is a vast amount of television made for networks, right? Yeah. Most American networks start their series in the September or the October, so that they can run up towards Christmas, split over Christmas for a few weeks, come back at the end of January often, and then run for a few more weeks towards the spring. And so you tend to have some episodes before Christmas, some episodes after Christmas, but they tend to be in the autumn to the spring end of the year rather than in the summer into the autumn end of the year, because fewer people are watching in the summer, and so summer is all about reruns on the networks. So you have to be in production now, otherwise you get to the autumn of 2024 and all of a sudden American television schedules are absolutely barren.
They have to be filming now to get stuff ready for the new year, for the rest, anything beyond this autumn. And it really doesn't look like it's going to happen at the minute, because the last I saw was a complete impasse with the executives presented the WGA with what was essentially a fait accompli. This is our offer, take it or leave it. And they said, we're leaving it, thanks.
Back to Doctor Who then. So it might be the case that there's a guest star. That's unlikely. It might be the case that the Disney money is a little bit more invested than we think it is. So there was they had the television thing in Edinburgh. What was it, last weekend as we're speaking now? So a week ago? Yeah. So they had the television conference thing, and there were people talking from the BBC, and there were people talking about Doctor Who, and there's a lot of talk about Doctor Who as a co-production. This was reported in where was it, Total Film, I think, or somewhere. There was a lot of talk about Doctor Who as a co-production, and there was a lot of talk about the Disney money, and the way the article was written seemed to suggest that the Disney money makes it a co-production between the BBC and Disney. And the quotes were sort of removed from one context and put into another context and read as if all these BBC executives were talking about a co-production with Disney. Now, if you resume the context of this article back to where it was before it was written down, presumably the execs are actually all talking about Bad Wolf. And so they're not actually talking about the co-production being with Disney, but the co-production being with Bad Wolf. And so that would mean the Disney money isn't necessarily invested to the degree at which these strikes would necessarily have a bearing on Doctor Who. But here's the other suggestion I think you can make. Bad Wolf is now owned or co-owned by Sony. So that means that the Bad Wolf money is also American money. So it might be that it's not because it's a co-production with Disney that Doctor Who can't go into production, but it might be that because it's a co-production with Bad Wolf stroke Sony that it can't go into production. So it could be that it can't go into production after all, potentially.
Well, the thing is, Bad Wolf, whatever Sony said, is a British company. So by the letter of law, certainly, I couldn't see it not going into production on that front. Sony.
Well, that's but
it would be possibly legally complicated to see where your sources of the money are. I mean, we know Russell is completely sympathetic to this writer's strike, so I don't think he would be someone who'd just go, "That's the letter of the law. We're sticking to it." He would be more likely to be, "This is what we're doing," because let's face it, the series stands and falls with him at the minute.
Well, and Bad Wolf as well, of course.
Yeah.
So if Bad Wolf's message to the BBC is, look, you've got Disney money, you've got Sony money, we're part owned or whatever it is by an American company, we don't think we can go ahead with it. The BBC are going to just have to say, OK, do it when you can. So I don't know. This was all speculation, but it does seem like the message that Doctor Who was due to return in the spring of 2024 was removed from this promotional stuff. So that being the case, it does look like there's something happening.
I mean, the interesting thing I found was the suggestion it might be that, obviously Disney has the worldwide rights to show the new series of Doctor Who. I can't remember what they've got for the previous 12, 13
not
seasons.
as yet.
No, but
they are disappearing from various services around the world, so it looks like they are going in Disney's direction. It's just a case of waiting for an announcement, I think.
So it's like that, all that materials. But that new series, they'd want that to be shown at around the same time, because otherwise, I think a lot of what Disney's got invested in it kind of fades a bit away.
You mean around the same time a lot of BBC have it
downloading, torrenting. Yeah, as in they want to kind of coordinate that. And it wouldn't look good for BBC to be, or Disney to be showing a new series of something in the middle of a strike.
But the strike's not really likely to be still going in 8 months' time anyway, is it?
We don't know.
We don't know, but that would be incredible if it was still going 7 or 8 months from now, next March or whatever it would be. That would be very unlikely. I don't think that's.
I don't know, because I believe California has a proposition to give the striking writers and actors unemployment benefits as well.
Thing is, though, Disney are not going to not put the November specials out in November.
Are they? Do we know this?
I don't think. The thing is, stuff that's already in the can, John, is still going to show up on screens. Otherwise, there'd be nothing going on as we speak.
That's immovable. We don't know when Disney's getting that, but I can't see them delaying it too far.
But they're not going to delay stuff that's already in the can, are they?
No, they're not. I mean, they're not going to delay the November specials because they're tied to the 60th anniversary. That's a non-negotiable date.
Yeah, but by the same token, if it came to, I mean, stuff that's going out on television, televisions haven't pulled their schedules just because of the strike.
No.
So they're not going to pull stuff that's already made because of the strike. I can't
see it. No. No, if it's already made, it's fine. I think the only thing that they wouldn't be able to have would be an American actors promoting it. So whether Neil Patrick Harris would be allowed to say promote the giggle when he's in it, I can't say. Because that would be complicated.
Well, besides things, I mean, that's a lot closer now than next spring, but who knows whether things actually will or won't be settled by then anyway, because we're still talking quite a few weeks away before November. What are we now, August? So it's still about 3 months away. Yeah.
Yep.
But yes, you've got plenty of other people who could promote that instead, I guess. But that's a whole other argument. I don't think what we're talking about is the specials. Let's move on anyway, because we do have a few other things to get through, and we've already been going for half the length of this episode, so we're going to run out of time.
Good Lord.
Film Story Simon Brew has advertised his first feature film, and his first feature film is basically an episode of Mythmakers, except not
Yes.
called Mythmakers, which is basically Sylvester McCoy sitting down for a 90-minute conversation about his entire life. So it's basically an autobiography on camera. So I think they're being a little bit disingenuous when they call it a feature film, but basically
Absolutely.
it's a feature-length interview with Sylvester McCoy. But that's interesting.
It is.
I don't
I
want
know
to.
Sylvester was he tried to write his autobiography once, but he hadn't got the patience or the mindset to do that, I believe. So this is the closest we'll get to it.
Sure. In the autumn, there's going to be another concert, first concert for about 10 years, I think, Doctor Who concert, since about
Yeah.
the 50th. Because I
It'd be
think
the
maybe,
Albert Hall, the Proms. Yeah.
I can't remember, but I think that was about it. And that's going to be on Radio 2. I wonder if there'll be video of that as well. You'd imagine there probably will be.
I think there has to be, because if I'm not mistaken, it's not in the main bit of the Millennium Centre. I think it's the Millennium Centre. It's in a smaller hall there, so it's going to be a
Sure.
tiny audience. So yeah, I'd imagine
really?
it's going to be
Yeah.
recorded or shown.
Oh, it's definitely being recorded, but so I guess it might be videoed, because like the Blur thing, Blur at the BBC, whatever, like that, I guess. Right, the main story then, or the main couple of stories. So one of them is slightly weird. One of them is as expected, but we've had the announcement. The slightly weird one, and then I think they maybe both tie together, probably don't, but you can't help but ponder. So let's say what the two stories are and then ponder a bit. So one is Kaleidoscope have announced that they're colorizing some Doctor Who. I just don't. My mind just boggles at why this is happening really in this way. But nevertheless, they've done it, haven't they? And
I believe so.
Yeah, and it was shown at some convention or something, and it was the few seconds that exist of the smugglers. So the censor clips. So what is it, about 20 seconds in total, or maybe
Total,
30 seconds?
if that.
Yeah, such a weird thing. So I can see. So I am one of those people who totally understands why you'd want to color black and white stuff, because I think it brings a whole new dimension to it, and it doesn't replace the black and white version. But what it can do is give you a new experience watching something that was made in black and white. And actually, Stephen mentioned this on Radio Free Skara the other week, because I sent them the link. But I found and I say I found, it's been sitting there for 3 years or whatever it was. I found that somebody had colorized the whole of black and white Doctor Who basically and stuck it on the Wayback Machine. And I've been looking at it. What I've been doing is, not every night, but quite a few nights, I've just been sticking an episode on to go to sleep to. So I've been watching about half an episode a night, every other night or something for the past month or something. I think color brings something to it and these are not very well colored. They're just sort of machine colored. They've just been set up by a computer program. It's very badly done. It makes the old sort of what's face colorizations from the 1960s and 70s look like modern AI computer colorizations by contrast. But the point of it is, it kind of, I think it puts you just that slightly bit closer to the programs, because the thing about black and white is that is a distancing factor, because
Absolutely.
Life isn't in black and white. So if you're watching something in black and white, you're not watching it the way it looked to the people who were making it.
Absolutely. I mean, the counter argument I would put to that is that you are then removing the tricks that they were deliberately playing, because they only had the monochrome medium to work in. It's like when you see the TARDIS is, it's green, it's blue. It's not. It's meant to be white, and it was coloured that way simply.
Yes, but it comes up as
tricks.
white on the coloured versions, so that's
It does.
fine. And the point is, anyway, most of those tricks or anything, people often say, oh, it's made to be seen in black and white. They make it a certain way because of black and white. They choose particular contrasts because it's black and white. Do they buggery? It's 25 minutes of television made on a production schedule. That means they don't have time to think about most of these things. It is literally just pointing cameras at people and shooting for 99% of the time. I don't think you lose anything by watching it in colour.
Oh, not at all. I
So,
have the same thing as it was made for tiny, the tiny screens, the 425 lines of the 60s. And we put these in high definition as far as we can. We put them in,
watching
blow
giant
them up.
tellies.
Yeah, exactly. They're not
Watch
meant to
them
be
in
watched like that.
stereo when they were made
Yeah.
in mono.
So you can see the backdrops of stuff like the Aztecs. It's like,
Yes.
well,
I
it
mean,
happens.
I've been committing the ultimate sacrilege. I've been making widescreen versions of classic serials this week for my own entertainment, and and not only that, I've been snipping out the intermediate credits and titles too. So they're in movie versions, 90 minutes.
You're going to fan hell, I tell you.
But it's fun and it's a new and different way to watch it. And if you're careful about where you mask the widescreen, you don't lose anything at all. Because I've made this argument many times before. We have stereoscopic vision. Our eyes are side by side, and artistically, aesthetically, we tend to put things in the picture sideways rather than up and down. So there's very rarely anything at the top or bottom of the screen.
Oh, there's some really interesting stuff. Elliot Chapman, I think it was, on Twitter or X, back when he was on there. He was going through Doctor Who's, where would you edit them these days as well? So you wouldn't have these days you don't need to make them 4 25-minute episodes. Say you can cut them down. Particularly with the way that information is processed a lot more quickly with TV viewership these days.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting exercise, I think.
Oh yeah, had I the time, I'd probably do a little bit of that, but no, I've got just about enough time to snip out the credits and the titles and make a movie version like that. But a 92-minute Terror of the Zygons looks absolutely amazing in widescreen, let me tell you. Anyway, the other story, of course, is The Underwater Menace, coming on Blu-ray in animation in 16:9 in stereo and animated. It wasn't animated when people first watched it in colour. Right, so that's coming in the autumn. Have we got a date for that yet? We haven't, have we?
I don't think so. Amazon haven't sent me one anyway yet.
One suspicion I read was that it was due out on November the 25th or something, the closest Monday to the, which would seem slightly crazy to me, because you'd want to enjoy it over the anniversary week, right? So you'd want it out a couple of weeks before the anniversary. But anyway,
or the Monday of,
at the very least. Point being, in the Mirror in January, I think it was, or maybe it was December last year. I think it was January of this year. The Mirror had a story, rumor that there were going to be 2 stories animated for the 60th anniversary, or I say for the 60th anniversary, but the animations were going to be back up and running, and they were doing 2 stories this year. And they named the 2 stories what they thought the 2 stories were going to be, and one of them was The Underwater Menace. So that part of their story appears to have come true. The other one they named, and this is why I'm tying it together with the Kaleidoscope story, was The Smugglers.
Which kind of makes sense, because those animations have been particularly looking to fill in season 4 at the moment. Which
season 4 and season 5, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that would leave the Highlanders as the only one in this series that wasn't then. And we know there were issues with that at the time anyway.
Between 4, 5 and 6, you'd have 1 story from each season that needs animating now for them to be complete.
Yeah.
And we know from season 2 that they'll put out a season with 1 story unanimated or incomplete. So basically, if they get The Smugglers done, you've got seasons 4, 5 and 6 can go to Blu-ray anytime, because they don't necessarily need to finish The Wheel in Space or The Space Pirates to do it, because they might just do it without. And obviously you can always slip a disc in if they do end up animating one of these stories.
And 5 and 6 is not even fully missing stories. It's episodes.
4 episodes a Wheel and 5 episodes of
5. Yeah.
Same as it was with season 2, although that was just 2 episodes missing from the entire season. But then the other thing is, we had this rumor last year, at least a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, that a couple of episodes had been returned, presumably from a collector. So a couple of orphaned episodes had been returned to the BBC. This was a rumor that never made it to the forums and to social media. so only a few people were talking about this, but it seemed like it came from a relatively good source, and the people who were talking about it seemed not convinced that it was true, but seemed to be giving it a certain amount of benefit of the doubt. Now, I don't, so I'm not here, and I've talked about this on the podcast a little bit before anyway, I'm not here proposing, oh, they've definitely found 2 episodes then, and it's 2 episodes of The Smugglers. But if 2 episodes have been returned and they're animating The Underwater Menace, of which 2 episodes are extant, and The Smugglers, and they're not animating The Crusade, of which 2 episodes are extant. I mean, there are other reasons. There could be, I mean, they're animating all 4 episodes of The Underwater Menace anyway, so it makes no difference whether 2 episodes of The Smugglers have been found or not, because they'd animate all 4 anyway. It makes no difference the Crusade as opposed to The Smugglers, the 2 episodes being extant, because Crusade's already out on Blu-ray as part of the set, so that probably goes down the pecking order in terms of, you know, so none of this points to 2 episodes being found. But if 2 episodes have been found and there are a couple of episodes of The Smugglers or a couple of episodes of The Crusade completing that story, or maybe one of each or something like that, all of this would tie together quite nicely. So I'm not saying I still believe this, but I'm still open-minded as to whether a couple of episodes maybe have been found. And if a couple of episodes maybe have been found, then this would seem to tie together nicely, because with Neil Patrick Harris coming in November on our TV screens, the obvious animation surely is The Celestial Toymaker, and
exactly that.
It doesn't look like that's happening, and that's the one you'd put money on, I think, if you were looking to tie all this together.
I know. I mean, the issue with it is that it's got a certain reputation as one of those stories that hasn't aged well, and there is the old children's nursery rhyme in there for a start off. But
you can fudge that by editing
totally.
that line slightly. And here's the thing, I think it's not aged well, but if you animate it, the animation compensates a certain amount for how it's not aged very well, because you can tart it up a little bit.
I think the point is, you know, I think someone said that Michael Gough's in Oriental makeup. He's not in Oriental makeup, quite clearly. And the point is that he is this colonial guy who it's an Orientalist who just deliberately dresses up in the trappings of, you know, of the culture that he's coming from. It's very deliberate. It's more on point than we think. It's not that great a story to my mind.
Oh, it's a terrible story.
It's an unfair reputation. Oh, yeah, and I still can't believe Brian Hales tried to sell it with a female protagonist later on. It's
his original story was a lot more interesting than the one that turned up on screen. Although clearly, you look at the Ice Warriors, you look at the fact that Seeds of Death was rewritten, you look at the fact that Monster of Peladon was rewritten. Hales was clearly not the best writer ever to work on Doctor Who. But the Celestial Toymaker that turns up on screen has got nothing to do with Brian Hales. I don't even know why his name's still on it, frankly. It was rewritten from top to tail by Donald Tosh. I nearly said Donald Cox then. Donald Tosh. And then it was rewritten again top to tail by Jerry Davis. So, I mean, it's 2 steps removed from Brian Hales even then.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Curry Smith had a great Substack on it, because it does get complicated in places. It's, you know, it was Gerald Savory was the head of serials at the time, or certainly, and they thought it would be a nice, he'd like the tribute, but he hated it. So
out it went.
Yeah.
But I think, going back to my original point, a lot of 60s Doctor Who looks quite creaky. Would look quite creaky if you tried to.
It has to.
But so something like the Celestial Toymaker, if you animate it, then A, the animation takes you a step away from what it originally was anyway. But B, you're animating something from the 1960s, and it's a bit like the Beatles films, right?
Yeah.
The Beatles films do not look like something that would have been made in the 2020s. part of the reason why you watch the Beatles films is for the nostalgia, and the nostalgia is not just about the fact that the Beatles are in it and playing Beatles songs, but also it's just about the aesthetics, about the tone and stuff like that. An animated Celestial Toymaker, the aesthetics and the tone would be okay, nostalgia for the 1960s. So I don't know. So
I don't. But something like the Macra Terror is deliberately playing with what we've got, because the size of the Macra on that screen that they give you is brilliant.
Well, this is what I mean. Celestial Toymaker could be improved by animation, probably would be, and the fact that it's Celestial Toymaker, now is the perfect time to animate it. So if the Mirror are right, and the other story that's being animated is The Smugglers, and The Smugglers has always been the other story than Enemy of the World that I've wanted to see returned, the one I most want to see in sort of live action, as it were, and animation would be the next best thing. So I'd be very happy if it is The Smugglers. Just seems like the whole thing is just a little bit slightly odd. There are reasons for things, and there are reasons against things, and the reason for other things, and the choices just seem slightly odd. Yeah, I mean, the Crusaders regard as a much better story than the Underwater Menace. I think maybe another reason why the Crusade is not a candidate necessarily for animation is because that does that thing that Evil of the Daleks does, and perhaps Ambassadors of Death a bit. It's that David Whittaker thing of, okay, this episode can be here, this episode can be here, and each episode takes place in a different location, which would be a nightmare for the animators, right?
Oh, you want those elements all the way through the story if you can, don't you?
Yeah. So something like Power of the Daleks is a lot easier to animate in 6 episodes than the Crusade would be in 4. But, by the same token, it's 2 episodes extant, so they could get away with just animating the 2 episodes that are missing. I don't know. The whole thing, to me, seems like a really curious situation.
Yeah, it's just odd. It's just odd choice, because you're not the main audience for these DVDs or Blu-rays is going to be the fans, and The Smugglers is never one of those that's at the top of everyone's list, even though it would probably be an interesting one. And I think its reputation would massively improve if you have the visuals to go with that soundtrack.
Yeah. Mind you, having said that, the only one left that would be at the top of anyone's list is 13 episodes long. So,
the Mythmakers, Marco Polo.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, the Mythmakers and Marco Polo are probably there or thereabouts with things like the Smugglers and the Highlanders, if we're going to be honest, and the Massacre. It's the historicals they've avoided so far. If the Smugglers is the first one they do, Reign of Terror notwithstanding, then fair enough. I think they're going to have
to. Vindication of Jerry Davis's policy to have one big set and 2 smaller ones.
Yeah, a lot of the Smugglers, there's a lot of stuff on beaches and in graveyards and that, but it's a beach and a graveyard and a cave, and then once you get past that, you're basically inside the building. A lot of them. I think it's one of those things of, if they can find a way to do those out, because Smugglers has got a lot of location, probably the most location Doctor Who had to that point by a country mile. If you can find a way around doing that stuff, then actually that becomes like an advertisement for the rest of the historicals, I think.
I think so. And to prove that you could, animate the costumes, the possible complexities of the costumes.
For sure. And that might be the point at which you go back and do the Highlanders, right?
Absolutely.
Because, so I don't know, we'll see, but really odd situation, but hopefully a happy one. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing the Underwater Menace, right?
Oh, totally.
It'd be interesting to see.
I did say that 10 years ago.
But it'd be interesting to see who's done these, because we don't know now, do we? I don't think they've said who's involved in this now.
No, there were 2 teams, weren't there, before? One of them, I forget who the one was. Was it Charles? I can't remember his
name. Norton.
Charles Norton's team, and then Gary Russell with
and Gary Russell
Big Finishes guys.
Gary Russell has said he's not going to do any more, I believe, in response to some of the criticisms they had over the last one.
Oh yeah.
Which I haven't watched.
Unless he wants to annoy Ian Levine, which is always possible.
Well, could be. I've not been keeping up with all of them because I'm future-proofing myself by buying them. But we've watched so many films and stuff for this podcast. I don't always get a chance to see them. But looking at the animation in the trailer for The Underwater Menace, I thought it did look like The Abominable Snowmen. So
yes, absolutely.
yeah, so I'm quite surprised.
It
Unless
had that longer arm thing of the View from the Deep as well. So they might be using the same animation house, which I think is in India or possibly. So I don't know if someone else is on the case.
Or it could just be that the BBC own the sort of animatics, as it were. So it could be that they're saying, right, these are the elements that we own. And okay, so you made that animation, but we're going to use those elements with somebody else and get them to animate using the same elements. That's possible. I don't know if that's really how these things happen. But if the BBC own all the elements, if these people are working for the BBC, then I suppose that's a possibility.
Yeah, and if it's already animated and the elements are there, and if they do, it would save certainly in long term on the animations.
Absolutely.
And particularly given we don't know what the funding is for these animations, because obviously it was a co-production deal with BBC America, but BBC America, for various reasons, have dropped out of it. So
yeah.
That would be interesting.
And obviously they're still relying on the steelbooks for a large part of the revenues, I think, because the steelbooks are 10 quid more expensive. And really,
absolutely,
you're not paying for 10 quid's worth extra product, are you? Frankly.
What's so you pay for is it the color animations or the black and white animations is exclusive, and the original episodes, you're buying them again?
Yeah, I don't think even that anymore. I think that's stopped. I think the steelbooks now, insofar as I was aware, the last couple of steelbooks had exactly the same content as the regular Blu-ray. I might be wrong. I didn't look into it because I've always bought the steelbooks anyway, because I bought the steelbook the first one, so now I'm trapped into it, right?
Yeah, and they look nice. They look nice on the shelf as well, let's face it.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, I guess we should wrap up. So I guess that was August's news insofar as we had anything to have opinions on, and there are a few of our opinions on August's news. Until we do this again, I was JR.
And I was John.
And we will speak again soon.